During their college years, Nicholas managed to win Alice over with a charm that seemed effortless, making her friends quietly envy her. At first, Alice had dismissed him, finding his personality a bit quirky, even strange. But as their paths crossed more often, she began to see beyond his oddities and started recognizing a side of him that she hadn't noticed before. What once seemed unusual now revealed itself as genuine kindness and a truly remarkable heart. Gradually, Alice came to realize she had been mistaken about him. He might actually be everything she had been hoping for without even realizing it. The rocky start between them faded quickly, and by the time they graduated, they were inseparable in every sense of the word. 3 years into their relationship, Nicholas knew it was time to propose, and without hesitation he asked Alice to marry him. Overcome with happiness, Alice eagerly agreed, her joy lighting up her face. They decided to hold off on starting a family, wanted to savor their time together as a couple before diving into the responsibilities of parenthood. However, their decision was not met with enthusiasm by their parents, who found every opportunity to drop hints or outright complain about wanting grandchildren. Nick and Alice often found humor in these remarks, preferring to laugh it off rather than repeat their explanation over and over again. Soon after, Alice landed a job thanks to a relative's connection, a position in a nearby factory where she could apply her skills. To her surprise, the work turned out to be far more rewarding than she had anticipated. What excited her most was a constant variety. No 2 days were ever the same. Even when she returned home exhausted, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She would often share the details of her day with Nick over dinner, animatedly recounting everything. One evening, as they sat together, Alice casually mentioned that she would be going on a 3-week business trip soon. She'd be staying with an old classmate during the trip. "Sorry to leave you to manage everything alone," she said with a small, apologetic smile. "I'll make it up to you when I get back. I promise I'll help you catch up on your studies." Nick gave her a quiet nod, his pride for her tempered with a touch of loneliness. He was happy for her. This was the opportunity she had worked so hard for. Still, the thought of spending 3 weeks in an empty apartment didn't fill him with excitement, but he understood this was something she couldn't pass up. Alice's flight was scheduled for the end of the week, and when she arrived in the capital, her longtime friend Jane, along with Jane's partner Nate, were there to welcome her. Jane was ecstatic to see her after so many years and couldn't wait to catch up. The days quickly passed by, filled with intense work, back-to-back meetings, and fresh challenges that drained most of Alice's energy. By the end of each day, she was so tired that all she could do was crawl into bed, often falling asleep before even lying down properly. Jane did her best to adjust her schedule to spend more time with Alice, but it wasn't always possible. Still, there was one night that would haunt Alice for a long time, one she would wish she could erase completely. "Are you off work today?" Nate asked casually one morning over breakfast. Alice nodded slightly. "How about we go out tonight?" he suggested. "Grab a few drinks and maybe chill with a movie?" Jane shrugged and added, "Yeah, sounds good." Alice agreed, though she could feel an undercurrent of unease she couldn't quite explain. That evening, they picked up drinks and snacks before settling in the living room. Choosing a movie took longer than expected, and Alice found herself growing more restless as time passed. When the film finally started, she struggled to focus, her eyelids growing heavy. Eventually, she dozed off. She awoke sometime later in the middle of the night, confused and disoriented. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was, but then it hit her, and a cold shiver ran down her spine. She was still on the couch. What shocked her, though, was that Nate's arms were wrapped tightly around her. Panic surged through her as she tried to pull away, but his grip only tightened. "SH," he whispered in her ear. The alcohol still clouded her thoughts, making everything feel distant and unreal, but his whisper snapped her back to the harsh reality of the situation. She froze, her entire body tense with fear and confusion, as Nate began to touch her, slowly, deliberately. Every part of it felt wrong. His hands were unwelcome, invasive. She didn't know how to react, paralyzed by the overwhelming mix of emotions. The next day, neither of them mentioned what had happened. They went about their routines as if the night before had never occurred. Alice said nothing, convincing herself that what had happened must have been a mistake. Just a lapse in judgment, something triggered by the alcohol. Besides, she reasoned, nothing had technically occurred, at least not in a way she could explain. The thought of confessing to Nicholas was terrifying. What could she possibly say? When she finally returned home, Nicholas greeted her with a warmth that struck her to the core. He was standing there holding a vibrant bouquet, with a bunch of helium balloons bobbing behind him. His entire face lit up when he saw her, and he wrapped her tightly in his arms. "I missed you so much," he whispered, his breath warm against her hair. That single moment unraveled her, and guilt flooded her all at once, overwhelming and impossible to ignore. A few days later, Nicholas's phone rang with an unknown number. He answered cautiously. A soft, unfamiliar voice spoke on the other end, hesitant yet strangely tentative. "Nick, you probably don't remember me," she began, his brow furrowed in confusion. Hi? Who is this?" "It's Jane," came the reply. He straightened in his chair, sensing that something was off. Jane sounded nervous, her words circling questions that were oddly personal, without clear purpose. He kept his responses polite, though the confusion grew. Then, unexpectedly, she dropped her guard. "Nate and I broke up," she said flatly. "I'm sorry to hear that," Nicholas replied slowly, still unsure why she was calling. There was a pause, followed by a long, heavy exhale. "It wasn't just one thing," she continued. "It was the kind of stuff he did when I wasn't around. Girls from the bar. He brought them home when I was at work." Nicholas felt a knot form in his stomach. "Okay, but why are you telling me this?" he asked, his unease growing. Jane hesitated again, her silence stretching long, before she finally spoke once more. "Because there's something you don't know. Something she'll never tell you." Nicholas didn't wait to hear more. He ended the call abruptly and sat in stunned silence, the phone still in his hand. Her words echoed in his mind like poison, spreading slowly through him. He didn't want to make assumptions, but a weight settled heavily in his chest that wouldn't lift. That evening, he returned home with a bottle of wine. At dinner, he poured Alice a glass. She raised an eyebrow in mild surprise, but accepted it with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The conversation remained surface level, both of them avoiding the unspoken truths that hung between them. After a while, Nicholas casually began telling a story about a friend whose wife had betrayed him. His tone was deliberately neutral, but he watched Alice closely, hoping her reaction might reveal something. She listened calmly, her expression unreadable, nodding sympathetically, but never flinching at the painful theme of the story. Just as the conversation seemed to end, Alice's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face drained of color. A message from Jane. "I told your husband everything." And then some. The words hit her like a slap. Slowly, she lifted her head, her eyes meeting Nicholas's across the table. In that moment, she knew exactly why he had told that story. He knew. What did she send? Nicholas asked, his voice steady but laced with gravity. Tears welled in Alice's eyes, and her voice barely escaped in a whisper. "I'm sorry." She moved instinctively to leave the table, panic rising in her chest, but Nicholas stopped her gently, his eyes never leaving hers. "Is there something you want to tell me?" he asked softly. Alice nodded slowly and trembling, but the words wouldn't come. She felt like everything was unraveling. The silence between them grew thick and suffocating, filled with everything left unsaid. Nicholas's mind spun, disjointed and chaotic, as the clock ticked on, indifferent to the crushing moment unfolding. Finally, he broke the silence, his voice calm but heavy with the weight of his decision. "I'll leave," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. Alice's tears flowed freely now, but Nicholas didn't move to comfort her. Instead, he stood up, his mind made up. The apartment, once a gift from Alice's parents, had always been hers. Now, it belonged to her alone. Nicholas packed a few things and left that night, staying on a friend's couch while he figured out what to do next. The divorce came swiftly, a quiet and bitter end to what had once been a bright love story. In the months that followed, Alice didn't remarry. She tried dating again, but none of the connections lasted. Every attempt crumbled before anything real could take shape. Her friends, once loyal and close, began to pull away, unable to look past the betrayal. Alice became someone to avoid, her reputation irreparably damaged. Work became her only refuge, a place where she could bury herself in tasks just to keep her mind occupied. But once the day ended and the sun set, the loneliness crept in. That was when the silence became unbearable, and the bottle of wine was opened. With each drink, she tried to drown the voice inside that reminded her of everything she had lost. But no matter how much she drank, the bitterness in her heart never faded. And so, each night, Alice sat alone with her regrets, once surrounded by love, now haunted by echoes of the life she had destroyed.